Hello there. Germany's elections result in probably Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who's supposed to be the center-right candidate. This guy has aspirations for essentially a unified Europe with an army on top. And considering the recent history of Germany, aka pre-dawn raids with SWAT teams on people who call an overweight politician fat on Twitter, I don't feel comfortable with this at all. It seems as though France is on board, and even Keir Starmer, though he's not part of the European Union, is signaling that he might be heading in the same direction, which isn't truly surprising considering the guy is supremely unpopular and has been leaning into authoritarianism for a while now. Claims that he's two-tier Keir, aka two-tier society where some are punished a lot more than others, are based on people's experiences, let's say, under his government. So, this tweet here says, it's a quote from Merz. Since we never want to wage war against each other in Europe again, we no longer need national armies. That's interesting. Supposing someone doesn't want your vision of Europe, do they need an army? Because you want to get one yourself. I wonder. Merz also said that there's 450 million citizens in the EU, which is more than the US and Canada combined. So he wants a more integrated Europe as envisioned by Macron and Adenauer, even a European army. Quote, Europe may need its own military alliance instead of NATO. Germany can no longer rely on the protection of the nuclear umbrella of the American military. That's from Merz. He announced that within a few weeks it would be possible to create a European equivalent of NATO without the participation of the USA. And this one's particularly interesting. Merz echoed this sentiment in a call jointly authored with the philosopher Jürgen Habermas for a European army, European rather than national terms when setting wages and prices, and even a European unemployment insurance scheme. So essentially a European superstate with no sovereignty afforded to the people. Now, if you know anything about the EU, it's a bureaucratic nightmare, and the voters actually have zero influence on it, just about. They don't. The elected representatives don't have a lot of the normal powers, like suggesting new laws, I believe. They vote on these things, but the way that you vote, etc., it's all set up by the bureaucrats. Basically, the bureaucracy has almost complete control, and that's mostly France and Germany, basically. So Merz wants Germany to spend 200 billion euros to boost its military capabilities urgently. He will negotiate this with the SPD at the same time as the terms of the coalition, which is to be announced on April 20. So, after saying all of that, what exactly do I expect going forward? Well, Friedrich Merz is a total liar. The guy promised tighter immigration controls and deporting the worst criminals, illegal immigrants that commit violent crimes against, people in Germany, in order to chip away at the AfD and gain more support for his party. He won the election, and less than 24 hours after, he basically came out and proclaimed to the world, I'm not going to do what I promised. There's not going to be any tightening of immigration controls. I don't want to do that. Nobody here wants to do that. We're not going to do that. An elected politician bluntly declaring to the public 24 hours after being elected, actually, I'm going to break my promises. It's something I've never seen in my life. This kind of brazen disregard for the public is truly one of a kind and very ominous, as if to say, I no longer need you. You are no longer relevant. I'm not thinking about the future of myself and my party in politics. Or, your opinion doesn't influence said future. Like I said, very ominous. The guy is also a BlackRock executive in the past. I asked Grok about it, and it's quite interesting to note. The guy worked from 2016 to 2020 as the chairman of BlackRock's German branch, a gig that had him rubbing shoulders with the top brass, including CEO Larry Fink. His role wasn't just ceremonial, he was there to open doors, leveraging his political connections to boost BlackRock's reach in Europe. The company is a giant, managing trillions globally, and Merz was a key player in growing its influence in Germany, a market notoriously slow to embrace big finance. So, the guy is absolutely a corporate suit. And for those who don't believe in the revolving door between the corporate world and the government, I got some examples, once again, courtesy of Grok. In the US, we have regulators like ex-Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson, who went from Goldman Sachs to government, then back to the private sector, with policies along the way that surprised, often cushioned Wall Street. In Europe, you had Mario Draghi, before running the ECB, was a Goldman alumni too, and his tenure saw banks propped up with regular folks ate austerity. The stats back it up. Studies like the one from the American Political Science Review in 2017 found ex-regulators in finance were disproportionately likely to land cushy corporate gigs, often with firms they'd overseen. So, what we're dealing with here is an empty corporate suit from BlackRock taking over the country essentially and dissing the voters. This is not a good position to be in. If you are German and at all skeptical of mass migration or really any government policy, expect a crackdown. They already started sending, under the previous government, SWAT teams to people's houses at 6 a.m. pre-dawn raids for things like calling a politician fat on Twitter. The most lukewarm criticism of the government or specific politicians can land you in hot water, or even just dissenting from woke orthodoxy. You can also expect, I believe, the start of digital IDs, CBDCs, and carbon credits. They will probably try and implement one or more of these during this tenure, because let's face it, the right is rising and has been for a while now. It's accelerating, and if they want to have controls in place to deny the ascendancy of their political opponents, deny the pendulum swing to the right that is happening due to their far left policies and refusal to have any discussion or compromise, then the only way for them to do it is through creating the digital system that entraps you and prevents you from even expressing your dissent. An EU army is definitely a worrying idea. And honestly, if the EU becomes a superstate that can set wages, unemployment benefits, fiscal policy, basically all policies for all member states, then I think the implementation of dystopian controls would be far smoother, quicker, and perhaps even nigh unstoppable. On the other hand, the more fragmented Europe is, the less easy and comfortable it is for the bureaucrats in charge to implement such a vision in one quick stroke. The thing is, once they implement it in one place and it creates misery and fails, other places will resist far more. So what they aim to do, what they need to do, is to take us all down at once. That's obviously the plan. That's why they're trying to consolidate power as much as possible. They're against small businesses, they want large ones. They're against small banks, they want large ones. Do you remember after the Sam Bankman-Fried problem, we had a bunch of small and medium-sized banks starting to tether and even some collapsed. And the result was a lot of money going from these banks to the safer, larger banks, where basically you have the government guarantees that a certain amount of money will be returned to you no matter what. And I can't say that I enjoyed that period of time, because honestly it feels as though it's consolidation of power on a societal level, consolidation of resources, and they just want to reach a state where they have every bit of information on you and every power that could possibly be managed on your life concentrated in one place, where the push of a button can basically shut you out of the system and cut you off from everything you need in order to live in the modern world. In such a system, they don't even need to depend on the army. They don't need to arrest anyone. You're just theirs, you're stuck, you're livestock. And this sort of system depends largely on digital IDs and CBDCs and of course smart cities. These are the three requirements in my opinion. It's why we should resist these things at all costs, but with the new German leadership, despite the fact that it's signifying a large move to the right, we still get the same left-wing policies, the same globalization, the same erosion of freedom. It didn't really seem to impact government policies at all, which makes sense, incidentally. One puppet of corporate executives has gone, another took its place, that's all. I also want to talk about the sort of willing subordination of leaders like, let's say, Keir Starmer to superstate structures. Essentially, if you are the elected representative of your country by right, meaning that you depend on public support to do so, and you have earned it yourself, you're not beholden to a large extent to others, then being subordinated to a superstate like the European Union is a demotion. You would want to maintain your independence and your power. However, if you're just an empty suit propped up by corporate money, then you're not truly the leader of the country. You're just an actor. And bowing to the people who funded you and brought you there is the most natural thing in the world. A true leader of his people would not wish to subordinate himself simply because he would be diminishing his own power and reach from a selfish perspective. And don't tell me that Keir Starmer cares so much about the people of Britain that he's going to sacrifice his own aspirations for their greater good. I don't believe it for a second. I mean, there's very few modern politicians that you could ever believe something like that of. I also don't see what benefit you actually get from becoming a part of this kind of union. Let's be honest, it's not as though that the countries that lead the European Union, Germany and France, have been doing that well in terms of both economics and sort of societal metric like safety, prosperity, happiness, health, and so on. Pretty much the countries that lead the charge to progressivism, to wokeness, have seen a decrease in all of those metrics. And actually, you'd find that people are much happier in countries that have resisted mass migration. Because life is much easier when you don't import like a giant new city of peoples with every year that need jobs and houses and obviously create strain on the existing system. It's just from a quality of life perspective, let alone the cultural perspective, where you have a far more distrust of strangers. If you import a bunch of people from third world countries, especially military-aged men, your crime rate is bound to skyrocket. I mean, just look at just look at the crime rates where they came from and understand that it is inevitable. I honestly don't see why anyone would want to allow Germany and France to set all of the policies of your government. I mean, the idea that the more devolved an authority is, the greater your influence over it is very true. You have far more power, let's say, over who the mayor of your city is than who's the head of your country. And the same way, you have far more power over who's the prime minister of Britain than who is actually in charge of the EU. And that's before taking into account just how bureaucratic, labyrinthine, and undemocratic the EU structure truly is. Incidentally, did you know that the EU was first envisioned, let's say, by certain Germans during the 1930s as a blueprint for how to govern Europe after they've conquered it? And that's something to think about, certainly. Thanks for watching, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.